Welcome to the Insight Meditation community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
Okay, so tonight, the title of the talk, as you've seen, is Only Love is Real. And I wanted to I loved Mary Louise's talk last week, and I wanted to pick up with that because it can be such a paradox of living in the world of form and living in this kind of spacious, open awareness that sometimes we teach about, and you go, well, how does this all work? And it really is a paradox. They're both true, and they're both sometimes not true in terms of where we need to focus our attention. So I wanted to try to kind of tease that apart just a little bit tonight and see if that could be helpful. And I want to start with open awareness. A quote from John McCransky. Some of this you actually will sound familiar to you. You've heard it before. And so the quote from John McCransky is, "The fundamental nature of mind is our fundamental, innate, simple awareness. This pure awareness is the ground of all experience. The ground of all experience, all our thoughts, all our feelings, all of our perceptions. As such, it is naturally all-inclusive and wide open. Our dualistic thinking process tends to limit our attention to a very narrow sense of self as subject that seems to stand completely apart from others as object." And Mary Louise taught us a bit about this last week when we explored together the ways that the mind, when it doesn't understand the deepest nature of reality, doesn't come from that spacious place, uses the events of form to create and then steadfastly cling to stories as a way of just making sense of things. I loved her story about the guy with the peacock. You had to be there. If you weren't there, it doesn't make any sense. Pema Chodron speaks of the Buddhist teachings on the ways that the mind contracts in this way. She says, as soon as you begin to believe in something, then you can no longer see anything else. The truth you believe in and cling to makes you unavailable to hear anything new. And then McCransky goes on, he says, yet our fundamental pure awareness, even as it gives rise to such dualistic thoughts, is a vast expanse of knowing that transcends all such limitations, unfettered by concepts. So it really is a paradox. You know, we can get so caught up in the stories and in the guy with the peacock and the bare feet and the pajama bottoms. We can get so caught up in the stories of our lives that we kind of forget this spacious awareness. But by the same token, we try to attempt to live in spacious awareness and not have a clue about how to navigate with the actual events of our lives. So this kind of dance that we do with the paradox. What Kalu Rinpoche says, he says, we live in illusion and the appearance of things. Carole King says, only love is real. Division and form. The stories we tell are fabrications of the mind. They are illusions. They're things we make up. We are one. It is the heart of our practice. It is the heart of our practice. We each have a sense of this, or we wouldn't be here together in this little Zoom room. We each recognize that. And yet, and yet, even as, I mean, just look into your heart, even as you resonate deeply with that, even as it just sort of makes us grin and makes us come alive, even as we each have had moments, perhaps not even remembered, of experience of only love is real. Most of us are not yet fully realized in that way, such that we can just 100% of the time live in that spaciousness. We live and bungle along together in this world of form, and we get confused. We wonder, how do we navigate in our daily lives when we get into all kinds of painful struggles and with our partners and our families and our committees or our children or even our own little sanghas, when we receive that email or when we read the daily news. We watch ourselves and others very human ways that the mind tries to rush in with its stories to help us navigate the confusion and difficulty as it tries valiantly to make sense of things. Like people walking barefoot on the street, dressed only in pajama bottoms with a face full of shaving cream carrying a peacock. You had to be here last week. So the question of our lives and of our practice really is, how do we rest in that open field of awareness and live in the world of form, making wise decisions about how to direct and or redirect our attention, and discovering through that wise attention how and when to speak and act. We each can struggle daily in large ways and small ways to have the capacity to be with those storms of our lives without being overwhelmed with grief or anger or anxiety, without losing our ground of integrity or our commitment to the precepts of wise speech and wise action. We're also really very, very human. We struggle with maintaining and sometimes even finding compassion and love for all beings without exception. How do we act? How do we love? How do we say no and set boundaries? How does that work? Does the fact that only love is real mean we let everybody walk all over us? No. But then how do we practice wise speech and wise action? I think in one of my recent talks, I described 3 levels that Almas offers about living fully in this world of form. He said one level is where we give in to our more animal natures, the animal instincts to survive physically, to be safe and protected in our own little tribe, to have power and agency over others. We react impulsively to pain and threat with fight or flight or freezing in their many, many forms. We all know them. That's one way. The second way that Almas describes, he says, is learning to love in human form. Humans, ourselves, one another, as limited and fallible. Messy lives, messy emotions, mistaken action, relational suffering. Learning to transform it all into love and compassion though still on a human level. We find that, don't we, in our intimate relationships? I certainly do with my partner and my family and siblings in all kinds of ways. Messy emotions, mistaken action, relational suffering, learning to transform it all into love and compassion. And we can scratch our heads on how does the practice work here. And then the third level that Almas describes is a deeper level where we integrate our spiritual nature in a more complete way, where there are no fears or angers or hatreds or gripes. We're free of those things. Expression is completely spiritual. Only love is real. The soul and spirit become one thing. We've had some beautiful teachings lately from Pat and Susan, helping us to notice that space. Even as we don't necessarily live fully from that place. But nevertheless, isn't that what we're aiming for? So even as we live simultaneously from all three places, most of us are not yet fully enlightened, such that we live completely at that third level. Being human is hard. Maybe you've noticed. Being human with an animal, lizard brain, that reactive brain, is even harder. That lizard brain leads us to rush into reactivity. It's messy. We are full of light and brilliance, and we are very, very human. And Mary Louise spoke with us about that last week. This humanness was what the Buddha saw in his heroic journey to enlightenment, that there just is confusion, disappointment, pain, misunderstanding, and missteps. Pat spoke recently. There simply is praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute. There is suffering in this human world. This is dukkha. This is dukkha. We can watch our own tendencies to try to avoid some of the challenges of being human. We can become overwhelmed or shut down, or we act out unskillfully in blame or criticism of others or ourselves. There's conflict. Diane Musho Hamilton, in her book, Everything is Workable, says, I began to see that the first essential step in real conflict resolution is realizing the place of inherent peace in oneself. Realizing that place of inherent peace in oneself, the place where we know and recognize the truth that only love ultimately matters, only love is real. So our challenge is opening our hearts and minds as wide as the world to simple, kind awareness, first of all, to how it is. Bringing skillful qualities of mind and heart so that we can see more deeply what is happening here. For me, in my experience, now, with this. So as I often do, I want to invite you to take just a moment, to pause just for a moment, and to consider a place where your practice has where you bump into a bit of an edge today, or these, just like today, really, very recently, where there's something, that comes up for you in this world of form, that the sense of the only love is real that Carol sings about and that Kalu Rinpoche talks about it just doesn't seem accessible. It's clouded over. Maybe in your family or in the local community. I've been working with trying to help people navigate the restrictions on education lately. There's some edges there for me. Or the world, or, or maybe our Sangha community, a place where only love is real, just seems like it's a step too far. So pause there for a moment and see if you can find something that has a little bit of a glitch to it. The Buddha talks about dukkha as that place where the ox cart wheel goes. So where's a place for you where, your own experience gets just a little glitchy these days? If you need some, I'll give you some of mine. Okay, have you got something you can work with? We good? Did I give you enough time or you need more? Is that good? Yeah? All right? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to offer some ways of working with it. But here's the thing. Remember, I think one of my recent talks, I reminded you that the Buddha said that there are 84,000 skillful ways. And we won't have time to go through quite all of them tonight. But being skillful requires careful, kind, wise, and here's the thing, idiosyncratic attention. What is needed and skillful for you and your own healing, and for you offering your presence in the world may be quite different from what is needed for the person next to you. Remember, someone asked Ajahn Chah, why do you sometimes tell people to go to do one thing and then you tell somebody else to do the exact opposite? And he said, when I see someone walking along the road and I see them about to fall over on the left side, fall off the left side, I tell them to go right. And when I see someone walking along the road and I see them about to fall off the right side, I tell them to go left. So to remember that the challenge here is to show up for yourself. As the Buddha said, to make of yourself a light, cultivating your own wisdom, receiving your own grace, seeking the counsel of your own wise friends on the path. And indeed, sometimes even wise friends will invite you to consider going left when every part of you insists that going right is the only possible way. And maybe it requires very deep and very honest and very personal discernment. And that's the hero's journey. That's what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey. This very personal inquiry into, here's what's happening. Now what do I do? To show up for ourselves without any certainty at all that what we're doing is really the right thing. I love the quote from Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit. He says, "We are plain, quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner. I can't think what anybody sees in them." So whatever the difficulty is that you have identified, it's one of those nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things that make you late for dinner. What is that place for you tonight? So how to work with it? Seeing it is the first step. It's important. If we don't pause into presence and see it's like this now, then we're really lost, because then we don't have a clue where to go because we don't even know where we are. So it's like this now is the first step. But then we need to bring, and I'm going to name some ways of working with things, and I'd like you to kind of tune into your own deepest wisdom and see if maybe one of them might be something you could play with a little bit more in this world of form, you could play with a little bit more to see if there could be a little bit more freedom for you around that particular issue. Just a little bit, just a little tiny bit more. So the first might be just simple curiosity. Pema Chodron says the problem with our stories is that then we know what's true, and then we don't have curiosity about anything else. It narrows our vision. We start to look at the world through a straw, little teeny straw. And again, Mary Louise's talk last week, named some of the different straws, some of the different views that people might have about something that was confusing and difficult. Can you bring curiosity to whatever this difficulty is? Sometimes we want to kind of slam into it ourselves with some kind of harsh instruction about, well, Sharon, this is how you should be. If only you were like that, then you wouldn't be having this problem. Maybe not. That maybe isn't the way to go about it. Maybe there could be some curiosity. And Hugh and I will talk about this some in the retreat. There's a tangle here. How do you untangle this? I don't really know to start with. So curiosity. Is there a need for more curiosity? Trial and error. The Buddha very specifically said, practice trial and error. And an error isn't a mistake, it's information. So the invitation is to forgive, to notice our mistakes and to forgive them. There's a tendency to be self-critical when we find ourselves making mistakes. Tendency to be critical when we find others making mistakes. It's just how it is in this human form. We make mistakes. If there are 84,000 ways to practice meditation, then that would be 83,999 ways in this particular moment with this particular thing to make a mistake in terms of what's the best practice. So even if it's the perfect practice for the person sitting in that little square on the other side of you, it may not be the perfect practice for you. And can we give ourselves uncritically permission to do some trial and error and see, how does this work? Does this, whatever it is I'm doing here, does it really bring more ease? Closely related, you've heard me talk about this quite a lot because is allowing confusion, and I think I talk about it a lot because I'm confused a lot. And you've heard this quote so more times than you can remember. Confusion, I was taught, is the beginning of understanding. The first stage of letting go of the neuronal gossip that you use to keep you chained to very specific ideas about who you are and what you are capable of. The neuronal gossip, that those stories that Mary Louise was telling us about, that we go over and over in our own minds. That we try to make sense of things, but only according to what we already know. I think I've told you that one day in I've gone to Bali often, and one day I was walking along the street in Bali and I saw this woman with I think it was 4, those egg cartons, those gray egg cartons that hold, like, I don't know, a whole big bunch of eggs. She had 4 of them on her head, piled on top of one another on her head. I counted later, and that meant she had 180 eggs on her head. And I watched as my mind offered the very helpful opinion of, that's not the way to carry eggs. It was just like, my mind just offered, this is what I know about eggs, and I know for sure that's not the way to carry eggs. Nevertheless, she was doing just fine, thank you, carrying 180 eggs on her head. It probably isn't the way for me to carry 180 eggs, but anyway. Um, so can we allow ourselves to be confused and to have new information that just doesn't fit what we already know? Can we navigate even welcome discomfort as an important doorway to new discovery? Um, when I was working as a therapist, I used to tell people, if I, as a therapist, don't tell you something that absolutely sounds completely wrong, you are wasting your time with me. Because otherwise, you could just go tell your friends stories for free. Um, that I'm of no use to you unless I offer something that's a little bit different way of looking at things. Mm. So there are difficult personal patterns that need revision and difficult conversations that are wholesome to be had. And my own or others' discomfort, immediate discomfort, is not necessarily affliction. Speaking of difficult conversations, wise speech. Notice that the Buddha offered wise speech as what is true, correct, and beneficial, but that welcome and agreeable was not necessarily a criterion, that unwelcome and disagreeable speech could also be appropriate in some circumstances. Another practice of compassion for all beings, none of Kabir's statement, we are all struggling, none of us has gone far. Can I practice more with compassion? Maybe for myself, maybe for other people. Um, we need a sense of humor about our quirks as human. I found this little bit of advice from a 4-year-old. Judy, would you post that for me? So just having a bit of a sense of humor about things here, folks. You know it was a good day if you didn't hit or bite anyone. That's from Nathaniel, age 4. Thanks, Judy. So maybe allowing yourself a little grace there, to have a bit of a sense of humor about our very humanness. Working with what is ours to do. There are millions of problems in this world. Our modern culture, unlike the Buddhist times, gives us immediate access to many, many problems, much farther and wider, that are not mine to address. The Buddhist teachings on karma, all beings are the owners of their own karma. Their happiness and unhappiness depends on their actions, not on my wishes for them. No matter how much I might wish it to be otherwise, things are as they are. Although I wish only the best for them, I also know that their happiness and unhappiness depends on their actions, not on my wishes. And whether I understand it or not, things are unfolding according to ancient and natural law. This doesn't mean that we don't care. We do and we should care. We choose to open our hearts and offer as much love and compassion and rejoicing as we possibly can to others, and we also let go of our results. Limitless equanimity, this is from Pema Chodron, is not the same as an ultimate harmony where everything is finally smooth. It's more a matter of being fully engaged with whatever comes to our door. We could call it being fully alive. So practice of patience, kindness. Quote from Rilke, he says, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer." Good. You know this poem. It's from Kabir. He says, the guest is inside you and also inside me. You know the sprout is hidden inside the seed. We are all struggling. None of us has gone far. Let your arrogance go and look around inside. And maybe I'll just stop there with just that first part of the poem. We can maybe continue at another time, but you know, the sprout is inside you and inside me. Look around inside, he says. Only love is real. Look around inside. Okay. Thank you. Blessings.